Mae Govannen, my Elven brothers and sisters. Today is still a video about parables, like I said in the description, but I'm going to do a little bit more than usual on the parable this time. This one is about the parable of the selfish monk, or elf in our case. It's a parable about, or a story, about a monk that was so dedicated, so committed to being clean and pure so that he would reach his enlightenment, when he would realize his true nature, that he actually became obsessed with the purity of it all and forgot about the lessons of the soul. It's one thing to be pure as a spirit, but you also have to remember the soulful part that says we are here in service. So we're going to talk about that parable today, but I'm going to go into a little bit more length about it, especially because of what so many people today are experiencing about COVID. All right, and the fears that are coming from COVID and how it affects our attitude towards our fellow creatures. So we're going to talk about that for a little bit. In life, in this universe, on this world, there are really only two great goals for us to achieve in our life. If it takes lifetimes to do so, so be it. But there's really only two goals for us to achieve in the end. That one goal is to remember who we are. That this is a grand journey. That's what life is largely about, is the journey to remember who you are. To remember that we are Elven light, that we are God, that we are manifestations, aspects of God. And that is our true nature. There is only the one mind, and all we have to do is remember that. Again, that's the definition for enlightenment, to the realization of your true nature. There really is no difference between enlightenment and ignorance. We're the same person. Buddha made a comment one time, and he said that what did I gain from enlightenment? Nothing. But what did I lose? Depression and sadness and fear and so forth. All right, so the number one of the two things that we are to accomplish in this life is to remember who we are. And again, for some, it will take lifetime after lifetime to do so. And the second goal of this life is to be in service to others. So again, like the silver elves like to talk about, that as far as our soul or spirit, there's two sides of the same coin. There's the spirit and there's the soul. The spirit is our individuality. In that case, this translates into the first goal, remembering who we are as an individual, remembering that we are of God. The other side of the coin is the soul, and that's the service part, where we are in service. So we're meant to be, and I love how they put it, to be soulful spirits. We are to remember who we are and be in service to our fellow creatures upon this world. Well, nowadays that seems to be getting rather difficult with COVID and the fears of COVID, because it really is, again, like I said before, there's only two ways you make a decision in your life. Any decision. Is it based on love or is it based on fear? So many decisions today are being based on fear because of what the media is telling you, what the government's telling you, and I'm not going to go into a great detail about that. As a doctor, I have my own opinions on what I've seen. I've treated these issues in a clinical environment, and so, but I'm not going to go into great detail about that. Just simply to say that because of what people are hearing, there is a lot of fear. And so people are making decisions based on fear. And one of those is the incredible lack or diminishment of in service to others, for fear of the unseen, of the impure, so to speak. You know, I've seen this throughout time, whether it's the Black Plague or it's this or that or the Spanish flu. Humans have a tendency throughout time to look at others as impure and to try to escape from them instead of being in service. But then on the other hand, we have the other side. We have Gandhi, who was in service to all. Mother Teresa, who served in the horrible, horrible conditions of the ghettos in service to others. And she accomplished a great amount within her lifetime. I imagine there was an incredible amount of growth of that individual Elven spirit. My wife and I, When one of our sons was going through school, we actually homeschooled him for a while. And I remember during that time, it was so severe, the backlash from people to those who did homeschooling, that we were denying our children the social interactions, and they were going to grow up stunted in their social ability to interact with others. All right. We still made it fine. Our son did great with it. He got to play with his friends after they got out of school. He went into the city leagues, with sports and things, and he had a wonderful childhood. All right. Nowadays, you are penalized and ostracized if you allow your children to socialize. So much is being based on fear. Whether you think that they're valid or not, it is a thing that's happening today, is children are becoming very trained in social abilities. And unfortunately, there has been a rise in suicide amongst the very young because they can't take the lack of socializing. They can't take the quarantine type environments that they're being put into. All right. So again, the parable of the selfish monk. So here's a monk again, like I told you, he wanted to become so pure. And doing so, he began to eschew, to isolate himself from the others. I get it. I absolutely get it. I don't agree, and that monk was to later learn also that that was not appropriate. Myself, I'd probably be a great example. Most of you probably know, but not all, that I'm not only just a vegan, but I am a raw vegan, and have been a raw vegan for a number of years. And because we are attempting to realize the attainment of purity on the body, mind, and soul, or spirit level. Body, we do it through a clean diet, through exercise, sunshine, fresh air, things of that nature. Mind, we do it through our studies, trying to learn more about how to live a special life, a life full of the gifts that the universe, that life gives us. And then there's the soul, learning to be in service, to meditate, to quiet the mind. And so these are all different levels of purity that we attempt to achieve. But for some, they end up becoming obsessed with it. And there's a difference between contaminated and corrupt. All right? Contaminated, it's pretty hard nowadays to not live a life contaminated by the poisons that unfortunately ravage this world. It is what it is, and it is very difficult to get away from it. I used to say, well, if we could at least get down to Fiji and live on the fruits down there and the coconuts, we'd probably do great, but then even plastic is flowing up on the shores of the islands down there, and there is pretty much nowhere within the human world on this earth that is not contaminated with some kind of heavy metal or toxins or poisons. I've treated so much of it within the clinic over the past 20 years. So it's hard to be pure, to be clean, at least on a physical level, though we can try. And every effort we make not only helps ourselves, but helps the world at large by the choices of compassion we make towards what we eat and things of that nature, which also helps cleanse the soul. But there are those that go, okay, but I want to go even further. And again, like I said, I get it. But I can tell you that a person living in the inner cities, attempting to live a clean lifestyle and still being at service to others, is a far more pure soul than he or she that lives on a deserted island living on pineapples and coconuts and mangoes and isolating themselves from all others, being of service to none but themselves. It's kind of like what Jesus said about the woman who gave a donation, and it was a mite. It was just such a tiny, tiny coin, and she was criticized by others for giving such a tiny donation. And Jesus said her donation was worth of much greater value than yours because she gave all that she could and more. And you don't give what you can of yourself and of your resources. So, again, like I said, I get it. It's our desire to be pure, and we do what we can. And again, like I've said before, no judgment call on anyone. Everyone is walking their own path. and they're walking at their own pace. But I hope that we don't forget, amongst all the fear that's being ravished out today to all the citizens around the earth, that we don't forget that we are also here to be of service to others. And faith in whatever that is that you have can go a very long way towards keeping you healthy. And it's up to our growth to be of service. So again, remember, we're here for two reasons: to reawaken our spirit and to put our soul in service to others. All right, so I hope that helps a little bit. Again, like I said, you probably look at me and go, a raw vegan, he's really trying to be pure. And I am. I absolutely am. But I also acknowledge that I still live in this world of humans full of the toxins and poisons there are. But that doesn't stop me from being of service and going into town and being amongst those that are not making very good choices for themselves. So don't let fear stop you from growing personally and from being of service to others. Humans and all other creatures on this world need you to be here to help others and to help. And by doing so, you help yourself. We do not grow unless we help others. All right, so I hope that helps a little bit. All right, so again, this is the parable of the selfish monk, or elf in our case. It's a wonderful little tale, very old tale, and I hope it is timely for you. And I appreciate all those who send me messages and post on the YouTube about how these messages are timely for them. I appreciate that. It means a lot to me because, again, we're here to be of service. So enjoy the video, and soon I'll be coming out with a video again, like I mentioned. I'm trying to have it out in the next couple of weeks. A day in the life of one elf. What do I do throughout my day as an elf? And maybe some of these things you can do yourself. All right, everyone have a most blessed rest of your day. Namaste.
The Parable of the Selfish Monk. Long ago in ancient Japan lived a devout Shinto monk. He lived a simple life, but was often distracted in his prayers by the hustle and bustle of the city. He felt as if his neighbors and friends were polluting his soul. One day, he decided to undergo a harai, a purification ritual that would cleanse his body and mind. He set off on a long and dangerous journey to a mountain shrine, which took many days, but he was glad for the peace and solitude that it gave him. After returning home, the peace he found was so great that he wanted to hold on to it for as long as possible, and so continued to do the pilgrimage another 99 times. He would walk alone on his journey to the mountains, ignoring every distraction in his quest for balance. Come rain, storm, or shine, he made the long journey. Eventually, his devotion and practices began to reveal the world of the kami, and the man was able to see and understand the spirits and spiritual essence of all things, like the wind and the rocks which existed alongside our own world. But still, he spoke to no one, and he was determined to avoid anyone who he saw as corrupt, materialistic, or who had strayed from the path of non-attachment. Of all the threats to his spiritual purity, corruption and disease were the worst, and so he avoided these most of all. After visiting the shrine for the 80th time, he set out for home as he always did, but as twilight swallowed the sun, he heard a strange sobbing in the night air. The monk tried ignoring the wailing and pushed onwards, but eventually it became too great, so he strayed from his path in search of its source. By the roadside, he came across an old cottage with a crying woman lamenting the death of her mother and the fact that no one would help her to bury her. Upon hearing the woman's plea, the monk's heart sank, as he knew that touching a dead body would defile his purity. But as he listened to the woman's cries, his empathy soared like a crane in the early morning breeze. And so they buried the old woman together to ensure her safe passage into the world of the kami. The burial was done, but the taboo of death weighed heavy on the monk's heart. How could he have been so foolish as to defile his body by touching the dead? That night he could not sleep, and so resolved to return to the shrine and try and cleanse himself. To his surprise, the usually quiet shrine was filled with people, all gathering round a blind soothsayer who was communicating directly with the kami. The man hid himself, fearing to be seen and judged by the spirits. But the soothsayer had other ways of seeing and called him forward. The monk approached the holy woman fearfully, but she merely smiled and took his hand. She whispered a blessing only he could hear, thanking him for his kindness. In that moment, he understood a great spiritual secret. Contamination and corruption are two very different things. Filled with insight, the monk set off on his journey again, but this time helped all those who he met as he began to see the beauty of the spirit world in all things, even the city that he had previously shunned. And even though the other monks cautioned him against corruption, he simply smiled because he knew that true spiritual purity could only come from one's own journey.